For those of you just joining us, we have the pleasure of hearing from all of the women currently serving as president of their respected actuarial associations. So that's right, all 5 US-based actuarial associations have what you see before you is 5 women presidents. So we're going to move on to our next and talk a little bit about women in the profession. And I would like to learn a little bit more about over the profession of your careers. What changes have you guys seen that have affected women, positive or negative? And let's start with you, Virginia, if you could share your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think back often to conversations that I've had with my mother. When she was young, getting ready to go to college, she was very interested in the chemistry field, and she was discouraged from pursuing that as a woman. Just wasn't something that she really should be doing. So I compare that to my own, education, and all along the way, elementary school, junior high, high school, college, I was always encouraged by my teachers, to pursue that field because that was where my strength was, and that's a significant difference. And also, I just think about her life in general. She was a single mother. My father had died young, so she was raising the 2 kids, and she had a very difficult time getting a credit card, which I think younger people don't realize that that's something that was a problem back in the day. So those kind of things really stand out to me, that I don't feel like I've had the challenges that she had as a woman.
Virginia, that wasn't that long ago. Like, what year? We're not talking about the 1800s, right?
Well, I mean, she was a little bit older than a lot of my friends' mothers, but that would have been in probably the 70s.
Yeah,
like 60s, early 70s.
I think that's probably shocking to some of our younger attendees and viewers here that just that recently there was this issue where women were not available to even get their own credit card. So
right.
Definitely advances be made. Mary Ellen, how about we hear from you?
Sure. Yeah, I think perhaps the most significant change that I've seen that's positively impacted women is really a far greater acceptance of different timelines for achieving career goals. When I was in the early stages of my career, most women I knew who were juggling careers and raising children, did their very, very best to be successful at everything. But were more routinely overlooked for senior positions given the perception. All right, so the perception about their inability to really give 110%. And for many senior positions, there was a somewhat unspoken timeline for reaching various career milestones. But so many of these locked in expectations have changed, or they're continuing to change. And now there's just a far greater openness to alternative pathways to success for women, regardless of how they define success. And those changes ultimately benefit, women, but they ultimately benefit men as well. So it's just so wonderful to see.
I think that's so true, Mary Ellen. We're not just in a moment where we have all 5 associations led by women. I'm going to say that a million times, but I'm so excited about it. I think it bears repeating. But also we're in a moment where our workforce is really changing the way that they are being treated as employees and how they work remotely and how they spend their time and break up their day. And in some ways, it is being led by women who are probably at the forefront of demanding more flexible schedules and more understanding of their pathway in their career and what they, when they were focused on this and that and how much that 110% is possible. But we have to understand that people have a very large amount of them that they have to spread out to work and otherwise. And we need to understand that expectations are changing. And I think if we did not have such a significant shift in the workforce toward women, I'm not sure if we would have been able to get here or had as understanding leaders to be able to enable that. Do you agree with that, or is that?
Completely. Yeah, and
Yeah.
really, really well said.
Yeah, and Tanya, I had a conversation
Ellen.
recently with a fellow board member of mine who spent most of her career working remotely. You know, she wanted to stay home to be more accessible to her children, but she was also committed to her career, and she's been very successful at it. And she shared with me, you know, she was the only person in her office who did that for a very long time. And then many years later, someone else came along and wanted that same kind of arrangement. And then we had a manager that was not keen on this, but this first person went and advocated for this younger person to have that opportunity, and they agreed. And then she went to the younger person and said, just so you understand, you're not just doing this for you. You're doing this for every woman who comes up through our office and our company who wants to have this same kind of arrangement. And, you know, so if you don't do well with this, you take away that opportunity, not just for you, but for other people. And, you know, as we talk about women moving into leadership roles and being more assertive and asking for what they want, it's important for us to also remember that we're not just doing it for ourselves as individuals, we're also doing it for our other women who want to have the same opportunities. We're doing it for other men, we're doing it for everyone who wants to have an opportunity that's different than the baseline or the norm or the way it's always been done. And to understand that part of that is being a leader and showing that this is how it can be done, and it can be done well, and it can be done successful, and other people should get those opportunities as well.
Great, thank you, Ellen. Some really inspiring words here. We did have a question, you know, and Ellen mentioned, you know, you're doing this for the whole profession. And I don't know if, you know, as a follow-up, and maybe Mary Ellen or Virginia, you can share this. Have you ever felt an overwhelming responsibility as you think about these changes and your role in representing what women can be? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, I can jump in first. I don't think it's ever felt overwhelming. I think it just has been very exciting, just an exciting opportunity to contribute and to help affect change.
Yeah.
So it's you know, really just been kind of a thrill along the way, knowing that, you know, for a future generation of women, you know, their opportunities are going to be so different. And just so grateful that you can contribute in some way to their success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm a little slower to recognize that position. I just don't really think about, you know, being a woman in whatever position. Things have just, you know, happened, and but it's pointed out to me, and so I appreciate that, and you know, happy to help other people in those positions.
I remember, Virginia, when I was doing an interview in China when I was president of the Society of Actuaries, and they were going to be asking us all these questions, and the SOA had me, like, Jennifer can appreciate this, like fully armed, like all the possible media questions, and I'm all ready, you know, what is the profession doing this, how hard are exams, all these things. And I remember a female reporter at the end, she's like, I have one more question. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, so how do you handle being a woman in this leadership role? And I was like, you, Virginia, I'm like, oh yeah, there's that, you know, and you forget that, you know, this is unusual or being noted by other people. So thank you for your comments. And I think we're all being observed in different ways, women, men, otherwise, but sometimes you do need that little bit of a reminder of, you know, this is what it's about and this means something. So, all right. So thank you very much for that. Getting a little bit more in the profession, I'd like to hear from some other folks about over the course of the last several years, the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion has been at the forefront of many discussions. And I would say if it's been over the last several years, it has gotten an exclamation point over the last couple of years. Now, these discussions include issues affecting women specifically, and I'm curious as far as what advice do you have for women within the profession specifically? And for this, we're going to start with you, Ellen, please. Thank you. I think you're on mute.
See, I was afraid that was going to happen. So I'll tell a story from pretty early in my career. I was maybe 6 or 7 years into my career, and a client of mine was going through a corporate merger, and in the U.S., the sort of the other side's parent company won, so to speak, as they were kind of divvying up the leadership roles. So I was asked, we were working on merging 2 pension plans, kind of redesigning them, harmonizing them. And as part of this, it was like this massive rush project. So I was living an hour away from the office. I would pack a suitcase Monday morning, drive into work, go stay at a hotel Tuesday, Wednesday, sometimes Thursday night, not get home till Friday night, doing 14, 16-hour days. And those were the short ones. And then at a point every other week, I would fly up to Boston and spend 3 days on site with a client. And it became clear very quickly, this client, they didn't want to work with us. They wanted to work with a consultant that they were used to working with. But they were told, you're going to work with this firm. And they didn't particularly, most of them in leadership didn't really want me there. So I'd walk down the hallway and some of the senior leaders in HR and finance would literally look the other direction and not say hello to me. In the middle of all of this, my mother passed away very suddenly. So you guys can just imagine, I'm 28 years old and my world has just been turned upside down and I'm being thrown into this crazy pressure cooker situation. So as we're having an internal team meeting with the key account manager and the lead actuary and myself, we were talking and they asked me how it was going. And I kind of relayed what it's like being on site there. And this senior VP, one of the leaders in our company, said, well, that's a lot for you to take on. And I really appreciate what you're doing. When we get to the end of the year, I'm going to look at getting you some sort of like hazard pay or extra bonus for everything you've gone through this year and all the effort you put in. And I was like, cool. I'm not motivated by pay, but that doesn't mean I don't like to be recognized for things. End of the year comes, no extra pay, no bonus. And when I'm in a meeting and at the end of it, I say, hey, what about that thing we talked about? And this person looked at me and said, what, you want a cookie for doing your job? And I lost it. I started crying and I got up and I walked out of a senior vice president's office. Later that year, I was up for promotion, my first promotion to assistant vice president. And I was very excited. And there was a colleague of mine who was a very dear friend of mine, and he was up for promotion as well. I'm like, how cool is this? We're going to go through this together. This is so exciting. Promotion list came out. His name was on it and mine wasn't. Now, I want to be clear, he was very qualified for this, but so was I. And when I went and said, I don't understand what happened, the answer I got was that this person who had offered me the little bonus and then took it away said, well, she's too emotional and she's not mature enough to handle that kind of a role. And out of all of this, for me, came, first of all, once I got over the embarrassment of the situation, I ended up having a conversation with the leader of our office, who I didn't really know before that. And he became a coach to me, and he became an advocate for me. Now, I'm told he also pulled this guy aside and said, are you stupid? Or some variation on that, like you can't treat people this way. And he worked with me over the course of the next year so that when the next round of promotions came up, I was a slam dunk lock. And he became a friend, he became a coach, he became a champion for me. And just someone who I enjoyed spending time with and learned a lot from along the way. Now, coincidentally, the next year came along, and because of some redistricting within our region, the person who's supposed to champion me changed and the ball was dropped and I didn't get promoted a second year in a row. Not because of anything else, But it turned out, I found out through that second round of promotions, the person who vetoed me the first time, the day the request for promotions came in, he walked into his boss's office and said, you need to get her name on that list, and you need to get it on the top of the list right now, and I will go and fight for her to get it. I screwed up. So when you hit adversity, take it as a bump in the road and say, you know what, I'm going to keep going. If I know I deserve this, I know I'm good enough for this, keep fighting for it. And sometimes out of adversity comes success, because I ended up with, through my first denial, a champion, an advocate, a mentor. Through my second round, I ended up with another person who played those same roles for me. And they were later instrumental in getting me on the radar of other leaders in the company who helped give me opportunities that I might not have gotten if I had just gotten that first promotion. And then my second promotion came even faster. And my opportunity for a third promotion came even faster. So it's not always, you know, the old saying, like, something knocks you down, get up, dust yourself off, and keep walking. And look for those opportunities.
Well, you know, Ellen, what I heard there was it is important to have an advocate. And as I say, someone in the room where decisions are being made that affect your career, that is a champion and an advocate and recognizes what you're bringing to the table. Mm-hmm. But what I also heard was you were maybe your first advocate because you stood up for yourself. And I bet every woman on this panel has had a moment when they have had to stand up for themselves. Mm-hmm. But I also heard something else, and I'm going to say it's this thing that's become a taboo sometimes with women, but it shouldn't be. And you said you broke out into tears and you left the room. And I can tell you, I have cried at work. And I don't know if my other panelists have, but I've had remarks by male colleagues sometimes like, oh, she's a crier. She's so emotional. She does this and that. I don't see this as a fault, and I'd like to stop making this a thing. I think that, you know, this is how people react, and sometimes women react. And I think it's just this expression of emotion sometimes that gets people put aback a little bit. So thank you for sharing that very personal story. And I think, Kathy, you had something you'd like to share as well?
Yeah, you know, when I think about what advice I would give other women, for me, something that's worked really well is taking risks in my career. Because, you know, I've always felt like the best opportunities sometimes arise and come your way when you step out of your comfort zone and take a real chance on something. You know, I did it when I was earlier in my career, and I was one exam away from my fellowship in the Society of Actuaries, and I pivoted and started taking CAS exams instead. You know, that was over 25 years ago, and that worked out pretty well for me. You know, and then more recently, I mean, within the last few years, I moved alone to Reno, Nevada to become chief actuary of my current company. You know, my husband stayed in Florida where his job was, because that was important for some stability. And then less than a year later, the CEO announced he was going to retire. And that's worked out for me as well, and for my husband. So, you know, my advice is to take a chance. And I don't think that women as much as men are willing to do that sometimes. So expand your horizons, and you never really know where it might lead. It can be pretty exciting.
Thank you, Kathy. We have a question from one of our attendees that, do you think risk-taking was successful, not only because you took the risk itself, but because others respected that you took that risk? Is there a little bit of that?
I do. I think people view you, and I'm not saying that it's all about this, but I think people view you a little bit differently when you're willing to take a step that others might not necessarily take. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to quantify, but I do think that you might be viewed as a little gutsier than the rest of the crowd. So and there's some value in that.
I totally agree. It's a part of that persona and how you're kind of you show yourself as fearless, and then you eventually, yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Jennifer, did you have something to share on this?
Sure. And I'm going to add on because I have to talk about crying now that the subject came up. So I have cried at work a few times. I cry when I'm like, really happy, really sad, really angry, whatever. But I was in a SVP office, tears started, but I didn't leave. He like handed me Kleenexes and we continued on. And, I felt very passionate about the subject that I was talking about, which is why I was there. And later on, like a couple years later, he was telling this story. I'm like, oh, he's going to tell about me crying in his office. And I was feeling really bad about it. But what I learned is the emotional stuff didn't keep the subject matter. Like she stayed with it. She told me what the issue was. That was just like the crying was periphery. Like it doesn't mean you're weaker or that you can't, you're going to give up or something. And so he'd actually gotten a message about, women are stronger than just the tears or something that I thought was, that was an unexpected bonus from when he told the story. But the other thing that I want to share is for anybody, and definitely for women, that if you're feeling like you're maybe the opportunities aren't coming at work as quickly as you were hoping, or you're ready to take a risk like Kathy was talking about, volunteering is a great way to do it. And I think obviously you can tell from all of our organizations, we all support diversity and there's room for all sorts of ways to volunteer. And we encourage all kinds of people, anybody that's interested to participate. And it gives you a chance to practice some skills. Maybe it's leadership, maybe it's writing, maybe it's communication for groups or presentations or research, whatever. You get to practice in maybe a safer environment, more supportive environment, because you're not being judged by your boss or maybe your coworkers. And you build a network of people who might be those advocates for you. Even if they're outside of your company, they might be the ones that kind of hold you up. And so I encourage you that that's another place to grow if you're feeling like you're in a flat spot.
I love that. And I have used that method myself, and I can attest to the effectiveness. Before we move on to our next section of questions, we had a few really good questions submitted by some attendees that I wanted to kind of toss out there and see what you guys think. And the first one, you may have to think a little bit on, but the question is basically, how do you handle these situations where you're getting opportunities, maybe in part because you are a woman? I don't know if anyone's ever felt that that's kind of happened or that's part of that decision process. Has anyone think they may have experienced that? And if so, how do you handle that? Or how would you handle that or recommend someone to handle that kind of odd situation? Anybody?
Sure,
Yeah.
I can start and hand it over. Yeah, I mean, I have felt that, but I also had to, I came to understand when I really thought about it that even if in fact the balance went toward me because I was a woman, I wouldn't have been asked to take something on if I wasn't qualified. And I just learned to lean into it, just to really accept it and just be the best I could be and use that as an opportunity to really demonstrate why, I was the right choice. And it actually provided me with, a great amount of energy when I did have those feelings, because, it inspired me to do even more and share even more, and ultimately ended up in great learning opportunities for me.
Love that, Mary Ellen. I think we have one more person who wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo what Mary Ellen said. I think she's spot on. There have definitely been times when I've felt like the token woman in the room, or the other side brought a woman because I was going to be included in the meeting or something to that. But I think I would agree with what Mary Ellen said. Even if ultimately you got the position or got the opportunity because you're a woman, you still have to prove yourself once you're in the role. And so I've never given it a whole lot of thought. I've had that feeling, but I just press forward once I'm in the role and prove myself and prove anyone wrong if they ever had that thought.
Yeah, Kathy, I feel like opportunity comes in many different ways.
You're
and
right.
if I'm qualified, if I'm on that panel because they wanted to have a diverse panel based on gender, whatever. If I'm qualified, I'm gonna show up and you're gonna hear from me and you're gonna see exactly why that was a great decision, not just because of my gender. So I think that is really important. And one of our attendees made the comment about, sometimes women struggle with what's called imposter syndrome. Bet you all know what that is, and how do you fight that? Do you guys have any issues? Like, how do you work through that issue? Like, am I really supposed to be here? I think we've all had those moments. As much as I'm trying to be like, I'll take that opportunity, I've had my moments where I thought, well, maybe I really am not qualified to be there. Does anybody? Ellen, I think you want to respond.
I saw that and I actually started typing a response back to it before you brought this up. I sit here and I look around almost every day and say, how the bleep did I get here? Like, how did this happen? Because all I did, like in my head, all I did was I showed up to work, I worked hard, I gave the best that I could. And if someone asked, here's what I think what part of the key is. If someone asked me to do something, I said yes. Now, sometimes that was to my detriment and I said yes too many times. And I found, actually at points in my career where I sort of had this abundance of riches and I, worked myself into kind of a bad place because of it. But know that, believe in yourself, be honest with yourself about what your abilities are, and don't be afraid. If somebody else sees something in you where they're asking you to take on something, trust in them, even if you don't trust in yourself.
Very good.
And when someone takes that chance on you or gives you an opportunity, make it your mission and your job to live up to the expectations that they set for you. Someone's going to be your champion. Prove to them that they were right. And you're not an imposter. You're just human.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ellen, but I agree so strongly with you. I just want to make that point. As we often do agree. One attendee did ask us to define imposter syndrome. Jennifer, you want to give that a shot? You're very good at defining things like that.
It's when you think that, like, you got here without the skills, that you're pretending to be competent, or that you're pretending to be a leader, or whatever position that you're in, that you're not really everything that everybody thinks you are, kind of thing.
Yeah,
it happens to anybody, but it's more frequent to women.
Yeah, it's when you're sitting in the room and you self-doubt that you're actually qualified to be in the room, even though you are fully qualified. And it is something that is not exclusive to women, but is definitely much more common to women. So thank you.